Hello and welcome to Ramblers, Adventurers, Rangers all. This is my second story for June and the theme is dragons. This story for me is perfect for the new moon because it's about regeneration. It's about becoming who you truly are. And during the new moon, it's a time to rest and restore, as I say, and move forward with new projects perhaps. So this story has several themes in it, one of which is if you throw something away that you don't want and you turn your back on it, it will fester and it will grow and it will come back, bite you in the butt basically. So that's what this story is about in the main, but it's also about having the courage to see what is underneath, what is really there. And I think that's definitely what our peasant girl in this story shows us. So without further ado, I shall tell you the story collected by Asbjornsen Moe called Prince Lindworm. A long time ago, there was a king and a queen. They were blissfully happy. They had a peaceful and prosperous kingdom. There was, however, as is often the case in these stories, one thing they were missing, and that thing was a child. For many years they had been unable to have a child, and the king, he would dearly love an heir, and the queen would dearly love a child. And so it was that she was walking around the castle grounds to a forest which is not too far from it. She was walking along the edge of that forest, looking at the fruits of autumn, the blackberries, occasional raspberry, and the currants that were in the bushes there. And as she was absorbed in her foraging, she became aware of another presence in the forest, and she looked up. It was an old woman. Some may call her a witch, but let's not. In fact, she was the wise woman of that kingdom. And the queen, well, she did not fear anybody in her kingdom. As I say, this was a peaceful time. And so she looked up and she smiled. And the woman, she said, "You smile, my child, but I can see there is great sorrow in your heart. Tell me, what is that sorrow?" "Surely you must know," said the queen. "Everybody in this kingdom knows." "I'm afraid I do not. Do tell me. What is it, this sorrow that is in your heart?" "I cannot have a child," said the queen, "and I do so long for one." "Well, that is easily fixed, said the wise woman. "Oh, do tell me how." "Take yourself a cup with 2 handles. Speak into that cup your wishes and your desires, and then place that cup upside down tonight when there is a new moon. In the morning, come out and lift that cup, just as the sun's rays are warming the air, and you will find underneath it a white flower and a red flower. Now, if you eat the white flower, you will have a daughter, and if you eat the red flower, you will have a son. But under no circumstances must you eat both the flowers." "Thank you," said the queen. "Thank you so much. I will do this immediately." And she runs home and she finds herself a cup with 2 handles, just like this one. She takes this cup and she speaks into it her heart's desire that she wishes for a child. Fair of face, fair in nature, and of course, very successful. Who would not want that for their child? And after she has spoken these words into the cup, she turns it upside down on the ground and waits. That night is a dark night. It is indeed a new moon. And the queen, she barely sleeps. And as she sees the sun start to creep beneath the curtains of the window, she rushes down to the garden once more to see what is underneath the cup. And indeed, there is a red flower and a white flower. But which is she to choose? She does not know. For if she has a daughter, the daughter will surely have to leave home one day and marry a king. And if she has a son, he too may have to leave and fight in wars, for whilst this is a peaceful time now, one cannot always guarantee that. So she's left in a quandary. Until finally she decides to eat the white flower, the one that will give her a daughter. And so she does that. She eats that flower. And it is so sweet. It tastes like honey and all of the bird song that you could possibly imagine. If you can imagine that tasting so sweet. She cannot resist the red flower. And so she takes that and eats that too. And that too is just as sweet. All the dew from the mornings, all the sunshine that glistens down through the trees in the forest. It is just that sweet. And so it is done. As is the way with these things, 9 months pass, and the queen, who is heavily pregnant, goes into labour. She calls the local midwife from down in the town, and the midwife gathers the towels and the hot water and starts to help with the birth. The midwife is pretty sure the queen is going to have twins, but the first child that appears is not at all what the midwife is expecting. It is a black, slithering serpent. And she picks up the serpent and flings it out the window before the queen can see, for this must be witchcraft, and she does not want aspersions cast on her queen. And so, when the second child comes, a healthy boy, with the sun in his hair, the stars in his eyes, and the moon in his countenance, she is overjoyed, and so is the queen. She does not even think to question as to why she had a boy and not a girl, or where the other child was. She was just happy that she had this one beautiful, glowing child. The years rolled by, and so it was that the prince became old enough to marry, and marry he must, for there are more kingdoms to unite. And so the king and the queen, they send the prince out onto the road with a carriage and servants to go to different kingdoms and visit and to find himself a princess worthy of his hand. The prince has set off along the road and he gets to the first bridge on the way out of the town. And from beneath the bridge there slithers an enormous Lindworm, a serpent-like dragon, black and fanged with stinking breath. And it hisses at the carriage and the prince within. And it says, "Older brothers, marry first." And the prince is completely confused. And he says to his servants, go round, go to the next bridge and we'll get across there. But no, at the next bridge, there is the enormous Lindworm. "Older brothers, marry first." Okay, thinks the prince, okay, go round, there's another bridge, we can do it. So he goes round, gets to the other bridge. But no, "Older brothers, marry first," says the serpent. Well, there's nothing left for the prince to do. He has to return to the castle, and he goes to the castle and he explains to the queen what has happened. The king and the queen, they're both kerfuddled. They cannot understand what is going on or where this serpent has come from. And, well, since the serpent mentioned brothers, they call the midwife. And they ask the midwife if there is anything about the birth that perhaps they should know. And of course, the words come tumbling out, and the midwife, she explains of this terrible serpent that appeared and that she threw out the window and slithered off into the forest. Never heard anything more about it. Well, the queen now knows that this is her second child. And she and the king agree that it can no longer live in the wood, for this is not just a Lindworm, this is a prince. And so they call the Lindworm back. They entice it with music and fine food, and they bring it into the castle and allow it to live down in the basement, in the dungeons even, for That's the only place that's big enough to hold this serpent Lindworm, and it is angry. It doesn't matter that its parents have welcomed it back and given it fine food. It has been living in the forest for years. It is festered with its anger. And so the king and queen decide what it is they must do, for they realise that their other son cannot marry before this serpent has. For it's indeed true that older brothers must marry first. And so they start to search far and wide for a princess who will marry this prince. And they don't tell the princess what this prince looks like until the very wedding day, when they have found someone and she has stood there beside this enormous hissing serpent. The wedding is done. There is nothing she can do about it. And the king and queen, they think that that's the end of that. We found our oldest son a wife. That will be fine. And he takes her back down to the dungeon. In the morning, the king and queen go to check on the newlyweds and discover that the princess is nowhere to be seen, and all that is left is a heap of bones. It is very clear that the Lindworm has eaten the woman. Well, they think, well, we did find him a wife. Perhaps now we will be allowed to find the other prince a wife. And so they send the prince out again. But no, the same things happen with the bridge. And the serpent rises up from under the bridge. And he says, older brothers marry first. And so the king and queen try again to find the Lindworm a wife. The same thing happens. They're married, there are bones in the morning, the Lindworm has eaten the princess. And this goes on and on and on until kings will no longer send their daughters because rumour gets around that this is not a good match. Not at all. The king and queen, well, they're desperate. They do not know what to do. And it is then that the local miller's daughter comes to ask for an audience with the king and the queen. And she says, I will marry this serpent prince, but I ask for 12 months before I do so. Give her whatever she wants, said the king. And so he does. And the miller's daughter, she goes into the forest to contemplate her fate, to ask the trees what it is that she should do. And whilst she is there, the wise woman appears and asks her, what is it you seek the answers for? I am to marry the serpent prince. I am to marry him in 12 months. And whilst I have said I will happily do it, I'm really not sure what I can do to avoid my death. It is simple, said the wise woman. Very simple. What you must do is you must sew 12 wedding shifts. They're like nightgowns, white nightgowns. And you must wear them all on the night of your wedding. And you must ask to have placed in the room on the night of your wedding a big tin of lye, that's like soapy, ashy water, and a scrubbing brush, and a big vat of milk. And then she tells the miller's daughter what she needs to do with these items. And so it is that the miller's daughter spends the next 12 months making these 12 wedding shifts. And the wedding day comes. She is shaking with fear, for she just hopes that the wise woman's words will hold true. The wedding ceremony takes place. The king and queen just are in despair that another girl is going to her death. But this girl is insisting that this is what she wishes to do. And so the girl is led to the serpent prince's bedroom. When they reach there, the serpent prince looks down at the miller's daughter and says, take off one of your shifts, wife. Oh, husband, says the miller's daughter. Please slough one of your skins. The prince is quite confused. Nobody's asked him to do this before, but perhaps this is a reasonable request. He's going to eat her anyway. And so he does. And it is with great agony and great pain that he wriggles out of his skin. And so the miller's daughter takes off one of her shifts. And then the serpent says, take off another, wife. And the miller's daughter says, only if you slough another skin. And so he does. And this goes on, great writhing pain of the serpent as he sloughs skin after skin after skin until all 12 are gone, and he's left in a sort of gooey, white, wriggly, larvae type mass on the ground. And immediately, as the wise woman has told her to do, the miller's daughter, she picks up this gelatinous lump and starts to scrub it with the scrubbing brush and the lye from the tub. And when it is red raw, she then places it in the milk and washes the milk over it. And there, before her, emerges the most magnificent, handsome prince you have ever seen. No longer a serpent, no longer an angry Lindworm. This is a man, and he is exhausted. She lifts him and places him onto the bed. And she gets into bed and goes to sleep next to him. In the morning, the king and the queen, they come to check on the newlyweds, fearing that they will just find another heap of bones. But instead, as they peer through the door, they see two people in love and happy, asleep. A handsomer couple you will never meet. And it is so that the miller's daughter, who of course is now a princess, lives very, very happily with her prince. And the king and the queen treasure her dearly, for she has shown them what really lay beneath that serpent's skin. I hope you enjoyed that story. It's one of my favourite Lindworm stories, and there are many, many Lindworm stories. And they all seem to somehow involve milk as well, somewhere along the line. Somewhere along the line, the Lindworm is pacified, if you like, by the milk. I'm not sure whether it's some kind of lactose intolerant snake, but you'll find that along the way, there's often snakes and milk are often linked together. For example, it was thought that adders went and drank the milk of cows, which is absolutely not true. And so that's another reason why they were partly persecuted. So some interesting folklore behind that story as well. I could go on forever telling you about this particular story. There are so many themes, so many motifs, but I'm going to let you sit with that story and just absorb it. There are many different versions of it. You only need to Google them. That particular version was by Asbjornsen Moe. I will see you next month for more stories for older audiences. Take care. Toodle pip.